All right, welcome back here. Let's delve into another chess game, another rapid game here, and see what variations we get here. And yeah, as we climb up through the elos here, we'll probably be playing a little bit more theoretical lines. So the reason I'm aborting this game is just because I don't know why I'm getting matched with people like 200 elo below me. I'm not like, it's not that big of a deal, but I just want to progress a little bit faster here, probably. So I should probably adjust my rating range within the options here. Let's I don't know how. Yeah. This is something that I'll have to look into later, probably off video, but I don't know why I get matched with them. Okay, I guess it's insisting on matching us against this 1500, so we will play this 1500. And we're going into the open Sicilian here, pretty solid variation. So we have knight to c3, and then my response is the Najdorf variation. So we have bishop to g5. The response to bishop to g5 is the move e6. And a lot of different moves here can happen on move 6 besides bishop to g5. The two main responses from black are certainly e5 and e6, and basically you want to like know when you want to play all of these different, like when you want to play e5 versus e6. Bishop to g5 is a situation in where you want to place your pawn on e6 rather than e5. Now we can play bishop to e7. The reason I'm not playing b5 here is because I believe it just runs into e5. So I think we want to be careful about that move, noting that there could be a revealed attack on the rook here. So I believe bishop to e7 is solid here. Now we have bishop to d3, attempting to put more pieces pointing toward the king side here. And we can actually play probably h6 here. And I think h6 is interesting because we could maybe use this bishop to start like a sort of kingside type attack almost. Queen b6 also looks interesting, and it might force his knight to drop back to b3. Knight bd7 is also a solid move, looking to play knight e5 and fork these pieces. I probably like knight bd7 the best here, so we'll go with that. All right, now I think we can play this solid move. So he has committed to a kingside castle here, and I think we can go to exchange this piece here. We could even use the fact that, okay, now he's castled, let's start our attack here. So I think let's throw in the move h6 and see how our opponent reacts here. And if he captures a knight, I'm planning to capture back with the bishop, most likely, because knight takes. Basically, I want my bishop on this diagonal. 1, because it's threatening the knight. 2, because it's also reinforcing this square. And 3, it's a great diagonal in general. So let's take back with a bishop. And 4, it allows our knight to jump in with tempo against the queen here, which is a very solid move, I would say here. I think knight to e5 is a solid move with tempo against the queen. And then we don't even have to capture this bishop, because this bishop, like, we can take it almost at any point we want, because it doesn't have any other squares to go to here. This would just hang the bishop, and this is blocked by our pieces. So we could even now like play b5 or castle, because queen here does not now threaten anything because of the nice placement of our bishop on f6. So we could even play, castles in response to queen g3. We could play b5, I think is solid, aiming to develop our bishop to b7, since there's no longer any sort of threat here to our rook. And b5 also threatens to weaken this diagonal, which is now pressured, I guess, by our bishop here. So yeah, as I expected, we have queen to g3 here. And now the move that I probably am going to go with is b5. I think castling here is fine. He might follow this up with f4, but then we can capture the bishop here. And we're just doing well, I think, in this position. So b5. I think we're just doing well. f4 also opens up this diagonal toward the king, so we can develop with tempo. And we could even play like, I mean, if we're really trying to like extract all the juices we can from this position, maybe we could even play like queen to b6 in response to f4 before capturing the bishop. So now bishop to b7 is probably very solid. Queen to b6 prevents the move f4, so I think that is kind of interesting. We have castling. Queen to b6 also reinforces like a b4 push. I think bishop b7 is the most like simple down to earth developing move, and I don't think there is too much difference here between all of these ideas. So now I think queen b6 is pretty good. Queen to b6 is probably pretty good now. And the two ideas are, it prevents f4, which is not too annoying anyways, but it just outright prevents f4, and it also reinforces this idea of we could be weakening this diagonal. So now like b4 followed by takes, and now we have like massive pressure along just this diagonal in general. Like after here, we can maybe even win the piece. But let's play rook to c8 first. This might signal me that he is gonna forcefully play f4 here. So he could even capture like preemptively. Could play d5, b4, f4, takes. I think b4 is pretty good. f4 we take, and the knight could, yeah, this is what I thought would probably happen, but f4, now we have takes. Okay, this just, it almost loses tactically. Does it just lose tactically outright? Well, this, he actually has queen takes. Queen takes instead of pawn takes, and then we can't actually win the piece. But I think there's probably a different knight move, like knight back here. That because of this pin on the knight, we will be winning material. So let's calculate. We got this, knight back to g6. This piece is pinned. So maybe he has to move the bishop in order to add the defense of the queen here. And we play like d5. We could also start with rook c8. What is more correct here? Rook c8. Let's see. We could also just castle and play it safe. Yeah, we could have knight takes and then rook c8, because now this piece is still pinned, and now I don't see any other way it can be. We can add a defender. Queen takes, but then rook c8, and now the pressure is too much. And of course, pawn takes just runs into bishop takes. So now we have rook to c8. And the knight, the key thing is the knight is still pinned. So it cannot, we could have even played, no, we couldn't. Well, yeah, we could have, because knight takes, we would take the rook in the corner. But I think that's kind of, okay, let's see. Does this save somehow the position for white here? I think he's still losing material, although he may not be losing a piece anymore. I think he's still, there are too many threats on the board here. But we want to play this accurately. Queen b6 targets this pawn. Queen here might run into rook goes there. So queen b6 is probably a little bit safer. Queen b6 is probably the safest move in this position to try to extract the juices from this position. It also adds a defender to this pawn. And he's forced to move his knight back to defend. And so now I think castling is probably very appropriate. We could also even play like, no, bishop here runs into rotating. So I think castling is probably very safe here. And now since the board is open, we have very good chance. I think the position is very much in our advantage because the board is very open here, very open diagonals for our bishops. So now we can go for the double stack of rooks. And a safe way to do this is probably rook to the second rank here. If he plays knight h5, I think we just centralize our bishop here very solidly. So let's go for this slow positional attack here. Just accumulate the pressure here. So we have knight e3. And now let's proceed with our plan. Rook c8. And he might be trying to win this pawn, but I think we also can centralize our bishop here. Slightly improving our position. So I don't think we are too concerned with trading off a rook here. I don't want to trade on his terms because then the knight jumps into a square that's very annoying to deal with here. So I think just like making slight improving moves here. There's also d4 or d5, excuse me, is interesting here. Let's play bishop to e5. And we're threatening to somewhat mess up his pawn structure here. And now this does not come, I believe, with the same sort of effect here because we have queen takes f2. Yeah, we have queen takes f2. Let's not rush with that move. Let's calculate that. Because he can move his rook back here, guarded by both the knight and queen. But then maybe we can drop back our queen here and offer a queen trade. I think that is likely a winning concept here. The fact that we can drop back, exchange, and then knight here. Let's think about it. Yeah, I think queen coming back to the center here and knight takes does not come with quite the same effect because of something. We must take. How do I play this the smartest way here? I kind of like bishop all the way back to here, maintaining the tension a little bit. And staying along this diagonal. Because I think there are some threats here that are just very nice, such as bishop back to e5 for like the 5th time that bishop gets to e5, but hitting these knights, and creating the threat of, let's see, of take and then take. But now, of course, it's blocked by the knight. So I think now we can return our bishop to this square and go here. And then maybe play e5. So let's make sure his knight doesn't have anywhere interesting to jump to. I mean, yeah, I think bishop c6 here. And rook here. Maybe up this. So I think now this is basically obligatory. Wait, what am I saying? He blundered his rook here. Yeah, upon second inspection, it's just a blunder of a rook, but yeah, it's just a blunder of a rook. Almost got board blindness there, but yeah, good game to our opponent. That is a Sicilian Najdorf, and let's see how we had this played. So Sicilian Najdorf is one of the most immense, like, theoretical openings you could probably ever study. I mean, it's basically like almost infinite, the amount of variations that go into the Najdorf, but it starts with e4, c5, of course, the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, d6 is going in, inviting the Najdorf, and then d4, opening up the center, recaptures with the knight, knight f6, and then a6, the Najdorf variation. It was popularized by GM Najdorf, of course. It's named after him. But he was the one that found that like this was actually probably one of the most potent defenses you could ever play with as black, and it just goes heavily into theory after move 6. There's like a bunch of different responses, but today we're dealing with bishop to g5, and the correct response is e6, building up a small center here, we should say, and preparing to break this pin with bishop e7 development. Then queen f3. What is going on here with our computer? Queen f3 is actually like a way you can play this position, I guess, is what the engine is saying. It's a solid move because this bishop is still free to develop on this diagonal. So it's not actually hindering your development. It's a solid move here in this position to bring your queen out. So we have bishop to e7, looking to break the pin and also discourage capture here. And we have bishop to d3, getting his bishop out makes perfect sense, and knight b to d7. And the immediate threat, or positional threat, I guess, is knight to e5, forking his queen and bishop, whereupon we can choose to secure the bishop pair. But I chose to go with h6 first. I mean, knight e5 is still very strong. h6, I chose to go with h6 because I thought, well, if captures, I think it's definitely favoring black here, so I just wanted to see how he would react. And then we capture here. And then knight drops back to d2, basically inviting knight to e5. So we have knight to e5 here, and then queen b6 is probably already possible. I think I played b5 in this position, and the idea of that is you're both opening up a developing square for your bishop. You're also just starting to push p down the queen side here. You're pushing p. You're pushing pawns down the queen side of the board in order to weaken this diagonal a lot of the times. And a lot of the times, like in other Sicilians, you'll have your bishop fianchettoed. I just can't draw arrows today. I guess we'll have the bishop fianchettos is what I'm trying to say here, putting pressure down this diagonal, this long diagonal here. So now the game gets a little bit like unconventional here. We have a3 and bishop b7, just developing another piece. Castling is fine. I was just trying to play active. That's the only reason like I'm delaying castling here. There's no reason to delay castling. It's just absolutely fine. And queen b6. Yeah. Preventing f4 and also adding a supporter for this move b4, which is actually kind of a mistake because I didn't account for the fact that it's giving up this knight a4 square. I mean, I definitely still have a solid advantage though, even if he plays knight a4. So we take here, and this ended up pretty much like just how I planned. Now this diagonal is weak, so now there are definitely tactics here that can exploit this pin. So I take on d3, which is correct. Queen takes, and then rook c8. I don't know if this was actually the way to... I guess there wasn't a way to like win material because of rook a4, but just the fact that the position is now so good for black and open for the bishops is enough to have a winning advantage in the game. So I guess the engine likes here. I was a little bit concerned about this move. There must be a way it tactically doesn't work. Yeah, queen takes, and then this rook is guarded by the bishop. Interesting. Yeah, I was a little bit just scared of this move. But queen takes f2, rook takes, bishop takes, rook d1, saving the rook, and then bishop to e5, getting pieces pointed towards the king side here, and white is contorting himself to stay alive, I guess, on the king side. But I went with the safer move that didn't require much calculation. I went with queen b6, and we have the knight drop back to defend this f pawn, and then I just castled, just getting my king to safety, and decided to play with the strength of the bishops here. So we have first we go with the plan of doubling the rooks. I think is like kind of natural here, and rook to c8 here. And then the rook moves to c4 here, and I didn't want to exchange and allow this knight jump in here, but I guess it is okay to do so after like queen to b4. Rook takes, knight takes c4, queen to b4, rook to d1, d5. Yeah, so kind of a combination of ideas of using this pin and also the fact that we can push d5 in the future. But yeah, I went with bishop to e5 here. Pretty solid, like we're just making a minor improving move, improving the position of our bishop and targeting, now it's targeting things on the king side. We take, and then knight can still go to c4, but I thought because of, yeah, queen takes on f2 now, this variation where the knight hits c4 is a lot worse for white here, because now after rook f1, the queen can come back and trade itself off. So we have the queen trade, and now, yeah, bishop back to a8 is fine. Probably bishop to c6 in the first place was better, but bishop to c6, and then he blunders his rook. So he's already a little bit like phased from the entire game going on here. So I think this would have been, is this equal material here? Yeah, technically an equal material endgame. However, he has probably weaker pawns that we can exploit here, and I have the bishop pair in an open board, which is probably enough to be winning for black here, unless white defends with engine-like precision. So that's enough to win there. So going into the Najdorf, I'll probably just do an analysis up to move 6 for this video, because I think this is the first video. We played a Najdorf and won. I think it's the first video we've played a Najdorf, probably. Just like a pure Najdorf. But let's do analysis up to move 6. So starting here, we have knight takes, and let's start from the top. We have e4, c5, the Sicilian. The idea is to defend the center here from one of the flanks here, and that's like known as one of the best, probably the best response to e4, the most double-edged response. We have knight f3, d6 here, and the idea of d6 is to discourage e5, like a space advantage for white. And then d4 here, the idea of d4 is to open up the center, which we gladly will take with our pawn here, trading the flank pawn for a center pawn. And this brings the knight to the center of the board. Then we have knight f6, attacking this pawn, of course, and knight to c3, defending. Okay, so now this brings us into the open variation of the Sicilian defense. And there's a lot of different ways to play it as black, but the way I like to play, and the way I think probably is most theoretically sound, is the move a6, which is the Najdorf variation. And the idea of the Najdorf is actually pretty simple. a6 may look like a waiting move. What it is doing, it is restricting these knights, I guess I should say, from ever going to b5 and creating problems on your queen side. It is also preparing to move b5 and maybe b4, like an expansion on the queen side and an attack, I guess I should say, on these queenside pawns here, which can be supported by a fianchettoed bishop in certain variations. In most variations, you'll see bishops come toward the center here in the Najdorf. But now let's do an analysis of the different options white has to play against the Najdorf. So once you reach the Najdorf, black has the option of bishop to c4, which is the Lipnitsky attack, or it could also be, I think, called the Fischer attack. Bishop to c4, pressuring this diagonal. This is another variation in which you'd want to probably play e6, transposing it into like a Scheveningen structure here. I'll have to look at how to pronounce all these GM names, but it's converting it to this pawn structure, whereupon white can drop back to b3 here and put pressure along this diagonal is a solid way to play. You can also play a4, kind of discouraging you from pushing b5 here. But e6 is the response to bishop c4, and those are the main ideas that white has, like a4, restricting you from ever attacking this diagonal, and he's putting pressure here. And the reason we play e6 rather than e5 is because we do not want this bishop to be x-raying the f7 pawn, or spying the f7 pawn, I should say. So what other options does white have? White has bishop g5, of course, we saw in the game, which is probably, I would say, the main line, the main book line against the Najdorf. And against that, also we play e6. And the reason we play e6 is because white hasn't, I think it's because white hasn't committed this light squared bishop, basically, so it could still return to c4. White also has the moves like, let's say, bishop to e3 is another different bishop move, which is called the English attack. And against this variation, the book move is e5. And the reason behind playing e5, well, we might say, well, you just said this bishop hasn't committed itself. Like, aren't you weakening this square? Yes, but now the knight has to return back to e3, and we get like a quick castle here. But also first, we play bishop to e6. We put our own bishop on e6 before white can put their bishop on c4 here. We place our own bishop on e6, supporting this d5 square and stopping the bishop from being developed to c4. And then a lot of times white will want to play this in order to get a kingside attack by castling long ways in the English attack. So that is what you want to play against the English attack. You want to play e5. And then there is the probably less common variations that white can play against the Najdorf are, let's say, there's bishop e2, which is called the Opushenski variation. And against that, I like to push e5 as well, because now white has committed their bishop to a square other than the diagonal along c4 to f7. So against bishop to e2, you'll want to play e5 here, and you reach a structure that is kind of very similar and may transpose to the English attack here. After, like, you can play bishop to e6, you can play bishop to e7 first. Yeah, I think bishop to e7 is probably a book move. Bishop to e6 as well. And the idea is that basically after bishop to e3, you can still transpose this bishop to e6 into like an English type attack where they're going to play f3, g4, or they can both castle on this side. Like, can reach a structure like this. That's probably like, it's called the traditional line of the Opashinsky, but it's very balanced, I guess, for both sides. I would say more balanced than the opposite side castling game. So that's Opashinsky variation. There's also bishop to d3, which is a different approach to this. And then there's the Amsterdam variation, which is f4. And against that, you want to play e5 because this trade comes with tempo if he's going to trade. So usually white does not want to trade. They will play like knight back to f3 in this variation. And queen to c7 now, supporting the pawn and getting out of the x-ray of this other queen is a good idea. Also knight b to d7 I believe is a book move, but there's just such immense theory here behind all these calculations. Probably the most interesting and funny variation I could find, well, not most interesting, but it's kind of the most dubious and funny variation against the Najdorf, is what's called the freak attack after rook to g1. I mean, literally named the freak attack because you're going to get like freaked, but the response is e5. And yeah, knight can drop back to either side, and it's a little bit less like, it's a little bit less theoretically sound than the other lines. The idea is you're like supporting the g pawn with the rook, and you're just gonna like blast it down the king side here within the next couple of moves. But as long as like you play e5 and you play solidly in the center here, I don't think this attack will have much merit if you can play somewhat defensively as a Sicilian player, which is asking a lot from some Sicilian players. But as long as you don't let yourself get overrun, you should be fine against the freak attack there. So that's kind of a funny variation there as well that I should mention. I didn't even mention like any a3, like 6a3 or 6a4 lines, but those exist and are quite reputable as well. But that's just an idea of like how immense, in theory, certain openings in chess can be, and the Najdorf is probably the singular best. Maybe the Ruy Lopez is, but the Najdorf is like a very theoretically dense opening as well. So I think that is enough analysis on the Najdorf. You could go in, and that is just like up to move 6. You could go way more in depth than I just did, but that would be like a whole nother like hour-long video or something like that. So I will stop it there, and I'll say, if you watched, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.